How often do we argue about something only to figure out, maybe way too late, that we're not even using the same words to mean the same thing?
Oh, all the time.
Hmm.
Especially with big, complicated ideas.
Yeah,
It really muddies the waters.
exactly. And today we're doing a deep dive into an argument like that from Larken Rose. He offers this really specific definition of capitalism, and, well, he challenges how a lot of critics talk about it.
Right, we've got this extended argument from him where he tries to lay out what he calls actual capitalism.
So, our mission today is really to unpack that core argument. We want to explore the distinctions he's making and understand the challenge he's putting out there, for people who oppose what they think capitalism is.
And just to be clear, we're sticking strictly to the arguments and examples he presents in the source material.
Definitely. So, yeah, get ready to think about definitions, about ownership, what makes an exchange fair, because this one is all about precision and perspective.
So where does Rose start?
Well, he kicks off pretty logically, actually. He goes right to the dictionary. Points out the standard definition. Capitalism is an economic system, means of production privately owned. Trade happens without government interference. Pretty standard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like he immediately flags that definition as, well, not matching reality as he sees it.
Exactly. That's the key right at the start. He takes that definition and uses it to draw this really sharp line. He argues that what most countries actually have today isn't that.
Right.
With all the government intervention, the regulations, the subsidies, the, coercion. He says that's not true capitalism. It's closer to cronyism, maybe even fascism in his view.
So the common understanding is just wrong, according to him.
Fundamentally wrong. And he calls this the problem of semantics. He really believes critics are often misusing the word capitalism. They equate it with oppression, but they aren't engaging with his definition, the voluntary exchange one. He feels they often build a straw man. They paint voluntarists or anarcho-capitalists, people who want no state coercion, as somehow being for a government-backed force, which is the opposite of their actual position. He sees it as a major misrepresentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to make this clear, he uses an analogy, right? A pretty vivid one involving an island.
Yeah, the island and the bow analogy.
Yeah.
It's designed to strip things down to basics.
So walk us through it. How does it start?
All right, first scenario. Someone's on an island. They spend a day gathering unclaimed stuff, wood, vines, whatever, and make a bow and arrows to catch fish. Just using nature, nobody else involved.
Okay.
And Rose asks, is that act, just creating something useful from unclaimed resources, inherently oppressive?
Yeah.
For him, the answer is clearly no. This is like the baseline for legitimate private property.
Makes sense. So creation isn't the issue. What's next?
Okay, step two. Someone else comes along, sees the bow, and asks to borrow it. The creator says no. Rose's question, is that refusal oppressive? Or is it just the owner exercising their right over the thing they made? He argues it's simply ownership.
Right. You made it, you decide. So what's the third part?
The third part introduces trade. The bow owner says, okay, you can borrow the bow, but if you do, you give me half the fish you catch with it.
Okay.
And Rose frames this as entirely voluntary. Both people agree to the terms. Nobody is forced. So in his view, it's a fair trade, not exploitation.
That analogy really does simplify things, cuts through the noise. So how does he scale this up? Like, what if the person makes lots of bows, builds a whole workshop? Does that suddenly mean other people, just because they need a bow, have a right to take one?
That's exactly the point he drives home. He argues that if you follow the logic of taking based on need, you have to say yes, others can just take the bows or the workshop.
And he equates that directly
with theft. For Rose, it comes down to whether you respect the creator's ownership of what they produced through their own time and effort. Can it be taken by force just because someone else declares a need? His answer is a hard no.
As we listen to these scenarios, you really start to see how he builds his definition of ownership and voluntary exchange step by step. It feels quite intuitive in that isolated island context.
It's designed to be.
But let me push on that a bit. How does this framework, starting from, unclaimed resources and one-on-one trades, really address the messy realities of today, things like inherited wealth or historical wrongs that shape current ownership, or these incredibly complex global supply chains? Does he get into that?
Well, in this specific argument we're looking at, his main focus is really hammering home the principle of voluntary exchange versus coercion. He tends to frame issues like inherited wealth or historical problems as often stemming from past government actions like state-granted monopolies or privileges, which, in his view, are violations of true capitalism, not examples of it.
Okay, so he circles back to the state interference point.
Exactly. His core insistence is that in true capitalism, the ownership of the means of production, whether it's the bough or the factory, stays with whoever created or voluntarily acquired it.
And if the bow maker hires help.
He frames that as offering an opportunity. The potential helper isn't forced to take the job. The bough maker isn't forced to offer it on specific terms. Both sides can walk away. That voluntarism is key.
No coercion.
No coercion.
Yeah.
And it's this absolute emphasis on voluntary agreement and the right to what you produce that leads him into a really, really strong critique of the alternative he sees, which is communism.
Right. And his language gets pretty intense here.
It does. It's quite stark. Rose explicitly calls communism the philosophy of cockroaches and sewer rats.
Wow.
Yeah. He argues it fundamentally promotes taking from producers simply based on someone else's declared need. And he sees this as nothing less than enslaving the productive people to the unproductive.
That's quite a statement. It really shows this isn't just an economic theory for him. It's deeply moral.
Absolutely. It's a moral battleground. And again, just to emphasize for everyone listening, we're presenting Rose's viewpoint here as it appears in the source material, not endorsing the language, but explaining his argument.
Understood. So wrapping this all together, Rose issues a kind of challenge, doesn't he, to people who criticize capitalism?
Yes, he does. Based on everything he's laid out, he basically puts forward 3 points for critics.
Okay, what are they?
First, if you oppose the system he calls capitalism, the purely voluntary one, pinpoint the exact step in those island scenarios where the moral wrong happens. Was it creating the bough? Refusing to lend it? Trading its use? Where's the supposed evil?
Okay, point 1. Identify the wrong in the voluntary steps. What's second?
Second, if you can't find a moral wrong in those simple voluntary examples, then he insists you must stop conflating his model of voluntary capitalism with the current state-influenced systems, the cronyism he critiques. Stop using the same word for 2 different things.
Got it. Don't mix up voluntarism with cronyism. And the third point?
Third, he urges critics to stop misrepresenting people like anarcho-capitalists. Stop portraying them as defenders of hoarding resources, using violence or state power, when their actual philosophy is the exact opposite. It's based on rejecting state coercion entirely.
So identify the wrong, stop conflating, stop myth representing. That's the challenge.
That's the challenge he lays down.
Okay, so then what's the essential takeaway from this deep dive into Rose's argument? What's the bottom line?
The bottom line is that Larken Rose defines capitalism very narrowly and specifically.
Yeah.
It's purely voluntary production and exchange, completely free of coercion or state interference.
Distinct from what we usually see.
Entirely distinct, in his view, from the state-entangled, crony systems often criticized under the same name. And his core assertion, really, is that if you oppose his specific model of capitalism, you logically have to either endorse taking things by force, which he calls theft, or you have to reject the basic idea of individuals owning what they create.
We've definitely unpacked a very specific perspective today. We looked deep into Larken Rose's definition of capitalism, those key distinctions he makes between voluntary action and coercion, and that direct challenge he issues. As you were hearing those island scenarios, what stood out to you about how ownership and voluntary exchange were being defined?
Yeah, it really brings up a fundamental question, doesn't it? How critical is it that we're all on the same page with definitions when we talk about these huge societal or economic systems?
Right.
If we're using the same word like capitalism, but meaning completely different things,
Yeah.
can we even have a productive conversation? Can we understand where the other person is coming from or find any common ground?
It makes you wonder. And maybe a final thought to chew on. Consider the implications here. Is an individual's right to create, to own what they create, and to trade voluntarily, is that fundamentally different from a system where state power, or maybe just perceived need, gets to decide how resources are distributed? How does thinking about Rose's specific argument maybe shift your own understanding of these big economic debates? Does it make you think twice about the words we throw around?